Hi, everybody. My name is Shana, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of the Ottawa Public Library's online program, the Tech Cafe. The Tech Cafe is a series of presentations on computer and technology topics designed to increase your knowledge and stimulate your interest in technology. This presentation is called Take That Picture and will be presented by David Roston and Thomas LaRue from BuyMug, the Bytown Mac Users Group. David and Tom have been organizers of BuyMug since 2006. They are experts in using Apple products and both have been technology consultants for 2 decades, primarily focused on Apple-based solutions. For more information about BuyMug, please visit their website at buymug.ca. And I'm now going to turn this over to Dave and Tom.
Good morning, everybody.
So where are we starting, Tom?
I think we're going to start with settings before we even get into the camera. So to start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And go. Quick time.
Oh, that looks good.
Okay, perfect. So now you can see what my base screen for my iPhone looks like. And one of the reasons that we're going to start with settings in the camera is there's a ton of stuff by default that you can adjust to make your life a little bit simpler. We're going to start with the camera settings, and then we're going to look into photo settings. So in here, there's a ton of features that you can turn on and off, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because we don't have a humongous amount of time, but they are worth looking at. So the first one is formats, and you have this setting where it says high efficiency, most compatible. Realistically, just set it on high efficiency. You'll save more space in your phone, and whenever you send a photo by email or whatever, it will convert it into a JPEG, which is the standard format.
Before we get in too deep, Tom, does it make any difference if I'm on an iPhone or an iPad? These are all the same?
These are all basically the same. Yeah. Okay. So from there, it's really just it's one of those things. In some instances, you may want to set it to most compatible, but I can't think of one that comes to mind off the top of my head. Record video, there's a ton of features in here. I personally like 30 frames per second at 4K. It looks nice. I find 60 a little too small, I guess. It doesn't look as cinematic to me. It is useful to go to 60 frames per second if you want to slow it down afterwards, but that's a completely different webinar.
We should mention
record slow motion in here.
Tom does video editing for a living, so he's going to be rather particular about these settings. So for the rest of you guys out there like me, you can just try the different ones and see what works for you, because I might not notice the difference.
Absolutely, that's incredibly true. So in here, you have your two options. You have 120 frames per second and 160 frames per second.
240?
Yeah, I like 240 because that gives you more options down the road. It takes more space, obviously, because you're shooting twice. There's a couple of things. The first one, when you're shooting more frames per second, you also need more light. So you need to be really outside or have a ton of light inside to shoot 240 frames per second. But when you're outside in the sun or even light cloud, either setting should be fine. And my general policy is more frames per second is better if you can do it. The video format control, don't bother touching it. You'll know if you need to go in there. Preserve settings. This is one of these neat ones that is handy. Basically, I tend to turn off everything because I don't want the phone to default to going back to anything that I used last time, because each time I'm using it, I want to be able to pick specifically what I'm using. With the exception of live photo, which is a short video that your camera can take.
I'm nodding because that drives me crazy.
Yes, exactly. So you can, again, if you always use a certain filter for every single photo because you think it's great, this is where you can set that. The next one is scan QR codes. I turn that on because it's actually very helpful. Whenever you come across a QR code, you can just hold your camera up to it and it will scan it and sort it for you. The next one is composition, which for grid. This is one of the, this makes me so happy having this, and I'll show it to you later, but basically it just puts a grid on the screen to make applying the rule of 3 to your photos very, very easy. And we'll talk about that later. And then the bottom two, basically I say, just leave those on. Your phone will automatically take high dynamic range photos and keep the original, because sometimes the HDR isn't perfect or isn't, there's something weird about it, especially if there's a very bright light source in it. So I tend to just, take both and I'll pick which one I want later. That's
yeah, this is because you can't go back and take the picture again later most of the time.
precisely. Okay. Is that all of them? Yeah.
So that's the camera, right? Is there is there settings in like photos that we should do as well related to camera stuff, or?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
within photos, there's a ton of ones. And the first one is Siri and search. And you can go into here and I have everything turned on. And here's why. If you are like me, what I tend to do is I'm meticulous about organizing my photos, labeling photos, identifying people in photos, all of that good stuff. A lot of those features, unfortunately, are not available in on iPhone or iOS, to my knowledge. I don't know about iPad for sure, but definitely not in iOS. That's the kind of stuff you would have to do on your Mac in Photos.
Hang on,
now,
back up a second. Back up a second. You lost me there.
Okay.
They're not available where?
Sorry. A lot of the features for keywording and labeling people are not available in iOS yet. Okay. There's rumblings of it coming, but I guess they're just trying to figure out a way to do it simply.
Okay, so we can do this on the Mac.
Yes.
But on the phone and the iPad, we can't organize quite the same way.
Not the quite same way. You can still make albums and put pictures into albums and stuff like that, but it's just not quite as straightforward. Now, okay. The reason why Siri and search is useful is I can invoke Siri, show me photos of Sprocket. And then suddenly we have all the photos of my dog. That's so kind of useful.
How does Siri know that this is Sprocket? Is it because you set up Sprocket on the Mac?
It is.
Okay.
Now, one of the really neat things about iOS and Photos is you don't actually have to label everything. You can say something like, show me photos of aircraft. And because machine learning, oh, really? If you're going to do that? That worked before.
Yeah.
Show me photos of canoes. Of course,
no, I saw some airplane pictures come up.
Yeah, but they were not local.
Oh,
Usually
okay.
It shows me photos that are local. So I'm just going to back up a notch. And normally when you're not doing a demo, it works. It worked 10 minutes ago when I double checked it.
But again, so one of the things that's happening here is that Siri is pulling out information out of your photos like airplanes and canoes because of the machine learning stuff that's built in, but photos of Sprocket are coming because of the work you've done on the Mac.
That's right.
And it's magically blending them together.
Yes.
And the main reason that it's able to do all this stuff is because you're using iCloud Photo Library.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you got to explain that after you finish the settings.
Yes. So the next one is iCloud Photos, which is things that Dave and I will endlessly go on about. Please, for all the good things in the world, turn on iCloud Photos. You will eventually have to pay money. Not necessarily a lot. It's the first tier is $1, I think, and then after that it's $5 a month.
I think it's like
and those
1,
are both
3, 5. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, and here's why: is I can understand why people are hesitant to sign up to yet another monthly service. But one of the biggest pain points that Dave and I have run into over the years is people losing photos. It's no one gets broken up about losing spreadsheets or Word documents, but when they find out they lost the first 5 years of their kids' photos, that really stings. So having all of your photos backed up to the cloud safely and reliably is worth the extra, few dollars a year that we're looking at.
I find for me, the big thing about iCloud Photos is the fact that I have the same library on all my devices. It just makes it so much easier than having to shuffle photos around. I can take a picture, it shows up on my Mac, I can delete it on my iPad, I can manage my photos on my phone. It's totally worth it.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that it's very easy to dismiss the worry of losing photos, but once it happens, and for us being at the receiving end of people who have lost photos, it's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to organize your photos and have everything synchronized across all your devices is really useful. And one of the other features that we're going to talk about down the road is shared albums, which is really fun. But we're jumping ahead again. So
the one thing I will mention, the download and keep originals, that's something that you want to turn on your computer, assuming that you have, and by the way, you can do iCloud Photo Library with a Windows computer as well as a Mac. So if you have an iPhone, an iPad, and a computer, a regular desktop computer or laptop, as long as you have enough storage to contain your entire library, I recommend you turn on download and keep originals on your computer. That way, when you're backing up your computer, you also get a backup of your entire photo library. So in my case, I have 35,000 photos. It's like 80 or 90 gigabytes of stuff, but there's room on my computer, and that also backs up onto my Time Machine. So I have everything in multiple places.
And I have a similar backup arrangement. And the main thing about this is that using optimized iPhone storage is if you click on a photo that's not stored locally, what happens is it's kept basically a low resolution thumbnail. So if you're at home or something, it'll just download the one download it off the cloud and show it live.
So we got a couple of questions. I'm just going to jump into them here. Can you use
Sure.
iCloud Photo Library to a Chromebook? Yes and no. You cannot use iCloud Photo Library on a Chromebook to manage all your photos natively, but you can log into iCloud and look at your photo library from a Chromebook. The other question is about which phone we're using. So Tom is using, doesn't matter which phone he's using, but he's using the latest version of iOS. So if you have a 6S, then go in and go into General Settings, General Software Update, and make sure that your phone is up to date with the latest version of the operating system, at which point you will see all of the similar settings. Then the reason, Donna, that you're not seeing them is that your phone doesn't have the same capabilities. You should see all the iCloud photo stuff, but you won't see like all the HEVC and video and all that stuff because your phone just can't handle it. But definitely you can turn on iCloud photos. You're welcome.
Okay.
I usually have, so you have upload to PhotoStream turned off, but I think further down there's the albums one, right? The shared albums.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the other one that you turn on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never
and that's
seen
really
the
useful.
album one. I'm going to go look for it.
Yeah, I think that's a new feature. I don't know why I would want a hidden album. So, and shared albums are really useful because they let you literally share an album with other people. So for example, my partner and I, we have a shared album, and she will put in pictures from when we go camping, or some pictures she took in the morning on her morning walk, and we use that album and we send it to our Apple TV, which then uses that as a screensaver. So back when we used to have people over, the screensaver would be photos from our life. Now it's just us going, oh, that was a fun camping trip. That was, stuff like that. So that's kind of a nice way to do that. Another useful thing is when you have a party, or back when you had parties, you can share photos with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I use the same feature. We have a family album. My daughter and I went for a photo walk yesterday, and she has thrown a couple of pictures that she took into the family album so everybody can see them. So yeah,
It's a very photogenic time of year. So
it is. It is funny enough. Yeah.
yeah. Cellular data, basically you can go in here and you can basically, I have that turned off because I don't necessarily want to be uploading pictures over my cell plan because I don't have unlimited data.
And the way that the photo uploading works is if you take your phone or your iPad out, you shoot a bunch of pictures. When you get onto a Wi-Fi network and you're plugged into power, your device will automatically upload everything to the cloud. If you get home and you're on Wi-Fi, it'll also work if your battery is high enough. So if you have weird issues where you've taken a bunch of pictures and you don't see them showing up, make sure it's plugged in, make sure it's charging, make sure it's on Wi-Fi, and then it should work fine. I did have a call with somebody yesterday where we had to reboot all of our devices and then it started working. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty rare that things don't show up. And they're pretty fast. Like within a minute or two, your picture from your phone will show up on your computer, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And there is actually a way within the Photos app itself, if you just scroll to the very bottom, it will say, 7 pictures, and it'll say paused for battery life or whatever, but there is a button, a little text link to click resume, and it will start uploading the photos, even though your battery setting, it will override the battery setting.
Yeah, I've already learned like 3 new things today.
Well, I use that feature every day when I come back in from my run, so. So the next one down, autoplay photos. So that would just be it when you click on a video, it will just start rolling the video.
Drives me crazy.
Exactly. You're probably right. There we go. Show holiday events. I turned that off because I don't know. It showed me something. I just don't use it. And then you have your automatic transfer to Mac or PC. It isn't really as relevant anymore because of iCloud. So that kind of rounds up all of the settings within the for the camera and the Photos app. So now we're going to go out to the camera app itself, and now
we spent 20 minutes going through all the different settings, which is about as long as you guys should spend setting them up. But realistically, once you've tweaked your settings, you probably don't ever have to go look at them ever again. Now you know what they are. It's not going to be a surprise later on. Like, what are these faint white lines on your screen? And, right? You've turned on grid mode, and none of the rest of it is a surprise. So yeah, do spend the time to go through your settings. But realistically, the stuff that's coming up is much more important because it's all about taking the pictures themselves.
Exactly. So do that. So basically across here, we can see we've got the grid lines on the screen so that that helps you pick where to put things in a photo. And we're going to go across the top. By default, it defaults to photo mode, which you can see. And at the top here, you have this little lightning thing, which is whether the flash is on auto, on or off. My policy is turn the flash off because almost inevitably photos with flash just don't look right. As good as the flash is, I personally don't like photos with flash. I find they don't look right for some reason. Your opinion may be different, and that's fine. But you have the option to turn it on, off, or have auto. So
I also have it set to off.
So the next one over is live photos, and that will record a short video instead of taking a picture. I think it's 2 or 3 seconds, I forget which. They drive me crazy because I specifically want a photo when I take a photo and a video when I take a video. Your mileage may vary, but this is where you just turn it on and off. As soon as you click that puppy off, it's gone. This feature is one of the more useful ones. This is useful when you want to be able to take a picture after after 3 seconds or 10 seconds.
This
So
is
basically, if
the
you're
the good old days where you'd catch pictures of people running up to the group.
absolutely, absolutely. And if you have an Apple Watch, there is actually a way to sync to take the picture from your watch.
That's cool.
It is, it's kind of useful. And then the last one is filters. And I know lots of people who will spend all of their time trying to decide which filter they want to use. Maybe Noir. It's kind of Monday. But realistically, my personal opinion is I don't use filters until I'm done taking the picture. I will do all that stuff afterwards. That's just how I work. But you know, some people, they go, oh, that's what the intention is to take a picture that is vivid because it looks right. That works. Okay. And then down in the bottom, if we click on this, this will take you to the last photo that I took, which was a screenshot of my phone or of my watch. So then you
People are
have
asking about HDR. Is that not one of the things across the top?
so by default, HDR happens automatically. So whenever you're in a situation where the lighting is such that HDR should be triggered, it will automatically trigger it.
And what's HDR for those people who don't know?
HDR is high dynamic range. So that means what the camera does is it takes two photos bracketed for the darkest section and the brightest section, and then computationally merges them into one photo. And
the
results are,
example by any chance?
I can find you an example. Give me 1 second to open my photos on my other machine and go through it really fast looking for.
Now, a lot of people will be using HDR this time of year because I find that it gives a really colorful, bright, saturated, a little maybe overexposed look. And people like that. And back in our settings, we told it to keep the original photo as well. So you're going to have one that really jumps out, and then you're going to have the sort of, I'm going to use the word mundane photo that is not as, whatever, but you get to choose which one to keep. So is it normal when in HDR to get two photos instead of a merged one?
Yes.
Yes.
In this, remember when we were looking at settings, there was an option to keep the original photo as well. That's where that happens. And what I will do is I will quickly go into photos and let's see.
So I find that I like HDR in that it gives me a really nice punchy photo, but I also like the fact that I can throw it away and keep the original when I don't like it. So which one are we seeing here?
So this is the regular photo.
Yeah.
And this is the HDR photo. And you'll notice that in this case, the sky has definition on it. And whereas in this one, the sky is blown out.
Yeah, we don't really see a lot of difference.
No, you don't. Well,
no.
It's subtle enough, but most of the time HDR, it preserves details in the sky. That's largely what happens. Is you're taking a picture of you and someone, and then what happens is the sky gets blown out because it's the sky.
Yeah.
So HDR will try to bring that under control. Let me see if I can just doing a little bit of scrolling, looking for something that's.
So the HDR setting, Kathleen is asking, so that's going to be in your settings app under camera. You can turn on the preserve.
Camera.
Yep, camera.
And then right down here at the bottom.
Automatic HDR and keep normal photo. So automatic HDR means that it'll always take an HDR photo if the phone or iPad thinks that it's worth it, which is fine, let it do it. And it'll always keep the normal photo so that in case you don't like the HDR, you can throw it away and you still have a good photograph. You're welcome. All right, back to our, where were we? So we went through, the camp. Yeah, so you did the filters and then you did the timer.
Right, and then the last one is in the bottom right-hand corner, we have this little button, it's camera reverse. And what that does is it will turn on the camera that looks at me now. And again, you can kind of see in this case, we've got that grid on my face. And in this case, I'm framed a little weird, but it does work, I guess. But you can also adjust it so that it's a bit better.
So for those folks that don't know the rule of thirds, your primary focal point should be in
one
not
of
always
in
in exactly the middle, but in, yeah, so you can.
yeah. So in this case, what our eye tends to do is, in this case, if I sit right here and I'm looking off this way, you're going to be looking at this eye, because of where the lines of the grid line up. It's natural, and I forget who first noticed this, but if you do a Google on rule of thirds, you're going to have a wonderful time learning. So once we're done here, I highly recommend that you guys do that. That's a good way to spend a portion of the rest of your day. So we're going to flip that back around.
What I find is that the rule of thirds helps me to, like if I'm taking a group shot, for example, I'll make sure all the people's heads are in that middle row and the sky is above and the ground is below. And it doesn't matter if I cut off the feet because it's going to work well. You know, it's sort of, if you're in that middle row of the area you're focusing on, it's going to work well. And vertically as well. If you have like a street sign, for example, make sure it's in that center row and things just tend to look good.
Yeah, it's definitely worth taking some time to play with, and you'll notice it automatically. So let's go through all of the settings down here. So the first one is time lapse, and this is a lot of fun. This is most useful when you have a small tripod or something that you can put your iPhone on. In other ways, you can just lean it against something, and point it out the window, or you can have all kinds of fun. It's a really interesting way to see how things get built. It's or if you're working on a project, one of my friends she's working on a fairly large painting. So every time she's outside painting, she sets up her phone with a battery and she's recording herself painting, so that by the time she's done, she will have a time lapse of the entire painting being made, which will be really neat.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. Slow motion is exactly that. It will record whatever you happen to be shooting in slow motion, and the video itself will be trimmed a little bit. So the first, it depends on the length of the video, but the first, I think it's first quarter will be full regular speed, and then it will ramp down to the slow speed and then speed back up for the end. Okay, the next one is video, and that is exactly that. Can I fix the speed? Yes, you can make adjustments to it. And usually what I say is, if you're going to record slow motion, start recording well before you think you need to, and stop recording well after you think you need to. That gives you a bit of a runway. And that's just the video editor and me saying, it's always better to have too much than not enough.
Yeah.
You can always cut, but you can't invent footage.
You can always throw it away.
Exactly. And we're going to come to that. Next one is photo. It's just the basic photo. Square does exactly what you think it does. It makes a square photo.
What is the point of square?
Panorama.
Is this square thing, is that like an Instagram thing, or?
I think it was an Instagram thing. I don't remember exactly what the point of it was.
Okay.
But some people like square photos.
Right.
Panorama is a fun one, especially when you've got really big, like when you're standing on top of a cliff or something and you want to get that whole sky or something. You can do some really fun stuff with that. You can also, I learned, record a panorama vertically. So you have to flip your camera and then pan slowly upwards. And it takes a bit of doing, but you can do it, which makes, for fun pictures of feet and the sky.
Okay. We've had a lot of fun with panorama in our living room. I stood in the middle of the living room and I panned across the couch, and my daughter was sitting in the corner of the couch, and then we reached the middle of the couch and she jumped to the other corner of the couch, and then I panned across to the love seat and my son was sitting there, and then I panned over to the next one and he had run over and sat there. So there were multiple children cloned all over the photo. We had a blast doing it. So yes, there's some tricks you can do.
Yes. I did something similar at Blues Fest last year, the year before, with a friend of mine. And yes, he shows up in 3 places on stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is a feature that is there's no button for it, but it appears magically if you just hold down the camera button, and you're seeing now that it's just going crazy and it's getting 60, 70, 80 pictures, 86 pictures in a row. This is really useful when you're trying to catch a specific moment of something. Usually what you want to do is a piece of action, like your dog jumping, or your kid catching a ball, or some other action related thing, and you're trying to get the exact timing of it is a bit difficult. Just hold down the trigger button and go. It will merrily take as many photos as it can, and as you saw, I took 86 pictures.
There's
Now,
another one similar to that when you're in video mode, you can take a still image.
yes, when you're recording a video, I hit record down here in the bottom corner, I have the ability to take pictures within that video, and those will be saved as frames afterwards.
So, I mean, both of those I use the burst mode by accident a lot. I'm trying to frame a picture and I just take 27 pictures and then throw away most of them afterwards. Yeah.
Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is exposure control. So we've got whenever I click on this, you've probably seen this. When you're trying to take a picture of yourself and you click somewhere and you get this little rectangle that appears with a sun beside it. So I'm going to say I want the focus down here. So now you're going to see AEAF lock, which is auto exposure and autofocus lock. So it means that the exposure and focus are now locked on this little widget right here. Now, what's really interesting is if I click on it and drag, whoops, sorry, you have to click, and then this little sun, you can bring it up to brighten it or down to darken it. And that's very, very useful. So if you're trying to get a certain look, you have a lot of leeway right here to do that while you're taking the picture. And I find that whenever you are in the action of taking a picture, if you can catch it, if you can get the photo you're looking for in the camera while you're doing it, that's really great. But I think that's a little dark, so maybe.
I found it really useful when you don't have the option to shoot with the sun behind you. You're kind of shooting into the light, and that exposure lock will let you focus on someone's face rather than something else nearby, and also adjust the lighting to sort of try and get the piece you want, and everything else could be horrible, but at least you get the photo. I don't use it very often, but it is very useful when needed. It's also really neat that you can tap in a specific location in the camera and it will sort of focus on that. So even if you're not changing the brightness, just the fact that you're focusing on a specific area will adjust the rest of the picture to suit. So I find it really useful for faces, which if you guys noticed when Tom had the camera flipped around, it was automatically picking out his face and the face in the poster on the wall behind him. And that's kind of cool. And so you can actually tap, for close-ups, for example, you can just tap on a specific piece and then you get you get that piece in focus. It works really well for that. Again, something I don't use very often, but it's worth knowing about.
I was a Muppet in another life. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So where to next?
The next thing we're going to talk about is photo management. And this is one of those things that I can go on and on and on and on and on about, but I won't. One of the things that you're going to end up doing, and let's go find those two pictures. So in this case, you've got this photo and this photo, which, as Dave was saying, you probably can't see huge differences in it. But if I pinch and zoom and see, that's nice and fairly clear. And then if I go to the next one, whoops, it's kind of blown out. So the detail's not there because the sky's too bright.
Yeah, we can see the twigs are all
exactly
poor detail.
And that's because the sky is so bright, the detail in the twigs is lost. So one of the things that I advocate heavily is to, especially with HDR photos, is you're going to go, do I like this one or do I like this one? And it's like, well, the reality is that one's not a good picture. Off it goes. And that's one of the things I'm a huge advocate of. It's easy to take zillions of pictures, zillions and zillions and zillions. We all do it. And when you're trying to be productive while procrastinating,
when you're out shooting, you want to take advantage of the fact that you're there. You can't go back and shoot more photos later on. So what you want to do is take as many pictures as you can of your subjects, and then later on go back and delete. Because now you have more than you need. So Tom really did drop out. He's completely gone. Okay, that's fine. We'll manage. So what you want to focus on afterwards, and the magic number that I've been told is somewhere between 1 and 10% of all the photos you take are worth keeping. So when I go and I shoot something that I know is going to change quickly, that I can't shoot again, and fall colors is a perfect example. And I don't do a lot of photography, but I will go out and I will shoot 50, 60 pictures of like one tree or whatever. And then when I get back to the computer, I will delete 99% of them because I don't need hundreds of those photos. And it means that if you're deleting photos, it means there's less stuff to manage later. So it's well worth taking the time to delete. One of the interesting parts of doing this, I worked with a gentleman who ran a photography store, right? Printed photos for people and so on and so forth. And he would delete literally throw away about 95 to 97% of his photos. And he said, just keep the good ones. The rest don't matter because you don't want to have 1,000 photos to look through. 10 is good enough. So classifying and organizing photos. I do very little of this nowadays. I find that in Photos app, the machine learning process knows how to classify images and categorize them so that you can search for different things. So what I do on the Mac is I will create, in some cases, I will create albums with specific things in them. But most of the time I don't bother because your albums are organized based on where you took the pictures because your phone has a GPS built in. And the time of day that you took the pictures because your phone has a clock in it. And so it makes it really easy not to have to manage them. Photo stream. If you're using iCloud Photo Library, you no longer need the photo stream. The photo stream is a holdover from an older system to try and make sure you didn't lose anything. The idea is that we are basically going through and deleting photos. So you can see here, I've got a bunch of photos of my kids and my mom and some stuff that we were out shooting. So this is the forest near home. So I'm going to look at the photos and I'm going to say, this green one is nice. This yellow one is nicer. Gone. And I'm just going to keep doing that for whenever I do a photo shoot because I really want to get rid of as much as I can. So here is my daughter and I. We were out in the local cemetery. She was taking pictures of a very tiny little flower. And I'll go through this and I'll find a single photo that I like and the rest of them are gone. Okay. And that way, instead of having 39,000 photos, I'm going to have a few less. And, realistically, your objective is going to be to have less photos at the end of the day than before. And what happens, you can see I do have albums here, right? So I've set up, several shared albums and I have people albums and places albums, which I've created. And I tend to do these on the Mac itself, but you do have the opportunity here to create and manage a bunch of albums. And I really, really only use albums to group things together that are not normally grouped just by the day, for example, or the month when the phone is managing them for you. Okay. So when I'm making an album, I'm going to create, like I have one here, class and school. So this is my pictures of my kids over many years. Their school photos, their class photos. I just do them that way because that's a grouping that I want. So I have a client who does this for pictures of doors. I have another client who does it for pictures of flowers. It's up to you. But realistically, you do not need to manage your photos other than deleting them. It'll automatically have them by what's called moments. So this is all your days, your and so on. Okay. So you need to focus less on managing them. Now I know people are going to have questions, so let me find that window again. Where is share chat? Here we go. Okay. Sharing photos with other people. You can use a shared photo album in iCloud, or you can export them from the Mac app, for example, and then share them in another way. When you go into albums, you can create, you'll see I have several shared albums here, so you can just add pictures to them and then you can share them with a specific person. So let's go in here to photos. We're going to select photo and we're going to tap the share sheet, and I can go in here and I can never remember where this is. Oh, there it is, add to shared album. So I add it to a shared album, at which point the image itself is going to download directly to my computer because it was not on, in this case, on my iPad before, because of the way that iCloud Photo Library works. And then I can choose a shared album to share, to put it in. So I'm just going to stick it in the family album and post it. This is me taking a picture of my daughter taking a picture of that tree way in the background when we went out yesterday. So now I've shared it with the family album. And so if I go and I find the albums here, the family album, there's the photo. And that means that everybody else in the house just got a notification saying that there's a new photo in the shared album. And I do that for people outside of the family as well. It's super easy if they're on a Mac, PC, iPad, iPhone, or don't even use iCloud at all. It doesn't matter. You can still share with them. All right. I use a camera app called Pro Camera. I really only use the built-in camera app, so I can't speak to that. But I know there are a ton of other apps out there that give you different flexibility, different control over things. There's certainly nothing wrong with using them. I mean, go for it. All your photos should end up in the same photo library. So there's no harm in playing with 10 or 20 different photo apps. I'm not an expert photographer, but there are some things that you can do that will help you take better photos. One of the big things to do is when you're holding your camera. So how you hold the camera makes a difference. If you hold it way out in front of you, then you have your full length of your arms that's going to cause that camera to wobble. So if you just bring it in close, you know, tuck your elbows into your body, now you're a lot more stable. If you think of a tripod, for example, a tripod having three legs, that's a very stable platform. A monopod, like a walking stick, is also going to be a fairly stable platform, but it's got a tendency to wobble because there's only one leg. So if you think about that when you're taking your photos, try and get yourself in a position where, you know, you're more stable. If it means you're leaning up against a tree to hold the camera stable because you're taking a, you know, a landscape photo, you're going to get a better picture because of it, because it's going to be less movement. Now, the new cameras on the iPhones are fantastic. So, you know, this photo you saw of my daughter, for example, I mean, I just pulled up my phone, pointed it, shot it. It looks great. The lighting is great. Everything is awesome, and I'm happy with it. But you can always do more to get a better picture. So we have a note here. So Tom says changing position. So if you're taking photographs of children, for example, then you should get down to their level. Remember that rule of thirds. So if you have the heads of the children in the middle of the photo, then you're in the same plane they are in, and you're going to have a better you're just going to have better photos. Instead of shooting down from above, you're on the same level. It's just going to look better. That's what you're thinking about there is your camera angles. So if you're, you know, shooting down into a scene, is that what you want? Is it maybe you need to get down to the same level as the scene? If you're shooting upwards, you know, if you're taking photos off of a bridge, all the cars are going to look like Tinker Toys. Is that what you want? Maybe yes, maybe no, right? But just think about your angles. Okay, that's kind of important.
Bring your arms onto the sides of your ribs, bring your phone up, hold it with both fingers on both hands. And if you're going to follow someone, move your body, not the phone. Don't hold your phone out like this. Because even your heartbeat will shake the camera. So bring your arms in nice and braced, and you can take your picture with your thumb nice and easy.
I know that I use a lot of the time the remote on the headphones. So for those of you who have Apple headphones, clicking the volume up and volume down buttons will act as a remote shutter.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will hold the phone just barely in front of me so I can see it and click on the shutter, and that way the phone doesn't move. The volume buttons on the side of the phone are also another way of taking a picture, but I don't like them because I find that it causes the picture to move. Again, not always, but sometimes it's enough that you miss the shot.
Exactly. So, and on angles, it's, you know, when you think about movies, I mean, even now this camera here is looking down on me, but if I moved the monitor to point up, it would look different. And I mean, think about how in movies, you know, villains are almost always shot low, and you're looking up at them to make them look bigger, whereas the victims, you're looking down at them to make them look smaller. So it you know, you're saying a lot by the angle that you're using. So when my internet came back up and Dave was talking about get down to the level, it's like when you're taking pictures of children or your pets, get down, you know, go down to their level, because when you're on an equal basis with them, the picture means a little different than you looming over them. So
now you get to tell us about lighting and how we're doing it all wrong.
No, I'm not gonna say that. But you do want to be mindful of lighting. You know, Dave has thoughtfully closed his blind behind him, because otherwise he would be completely and totally.
Let's demo that. Poof. Right? I look better now, right? You can see my halo.
Yes. But to be mindful of where the light in the photo is coming from. So in my case, I have a window right here and a curtain across it. And if I move the curtain, it'll brighten a bit. And if I pull it back, and when you're taking pictures, you want to think about how light affects what you're doing. And you can really see that, again, if you look at movies, you know, when you have something in deep reds, you tend to think of the person's a villain or something. And just where light falls on your face or on whatever you happen to be shooting. And I'm going to, let's see if this is going to work.
So for me, what I find the number one thing for me is just to remember, do not shoot into the light. That's my level of, don't shoot towards wherever the light source is. I figure that if it's kind of somewhere beside or behind me, I'm always going to get a better picture.
Yeah, if you're shooting into the light, you want to remember that you're shooting into the light, like specifically. Mm-hmm. So let's see if this one does it.
Okay, I see you're sharing your desktop.
Okay, so, lighting and angles, I mean, no one can dispute my dog is adorable. And if you use lighting, like in this case, you can see I'm making a googly eye, but I'm also bathed in red, and that has a bit of a weird look. And then you have photos like this, where this is taking the picture and dialing it all the way down. And really, I was actually just dumping a ton of light on her when I took this. So it's really a question of just, really, it comes down to practice, 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 practice. And then when you're done practicing, practice some more. You can play with this a ton. And then the last thing that I have to show is, for a few bucks, you can get things like this. And these are called gels. And you can get these at Henry's for, I think, maybe $20 for 4. And they're fun to play with if you're trying to get a specific look for a photo. You just put it over a light and suddenly it changes the entire feeling of the photo. Now, I'm not saying, and I never would say that people have to buy gear to take a good picture. Really, a good picture is one that's well composed, well lit, and has meaning. That's if the photo doesn't have any meaning, no one cares. So one of the other useful things is a widget like this, which is a small tripod with an iPhone adapter that will hold, it just clicks and holds. This I think was $40, and it was either from Henry's or Vistech. I don't remember which one. I tend to go to eat both of those. So,
And that's what you were using earlier when you were sharing your phone?
Absolutely. I have it set up on my desk to hold my phone so I can just click on it without having to hold it. And then the last one that is kind of common now is this sucker. And this is basically a stabilizer. These used to be really expensive. Like, we used to be, around $1,000, and now I think they're about $200. And they're really great if you're trying to take pictures or video and have it be stable. So this will compensate for your movement while you're walking or shooting stuff. This is useful if you're doing skateboarding videos or stuff where you're doing a lot of motion yourself, because you're following someone close. That's a really useful widget to have.
That's one of those things that all the YouTubers are carting around.
Yeah, a lot of the YouTubers are doing that, and it's useful in some instances, but you don't have to go out, because guess what? Before I had that, I just used this, crumpled it up, and again, braced against my ribs and followed. So you don't need to spend a ton of money to get a good picture.
Last question. Advice for taking night photos, stars, campfires.
Astrophotography. I love astrophotography. I haven't had a lot of time to play with it, doing it on my phone. I usually do that with one of my other cameras and set it up on a tripod. And but the new night mode on the phones that were recently released is supposed to be really, really good. But for anything at night, you can, stars or a campfire. A campfire, you should be able to, again, brace yourself and set your exposure, watch the video on the thing and see what kind of lighting you're getting. You can adjust it up or down depending on what kind of a look you're trying to get. So if you're trying to get kind of a dark but with the fire being bright, you can just dial it down a little bit and then take that picture. If you're trying to catch everybody in it, you're gonna what I would probably do is focus on the brightest person that you can see around the campfire, focus on them, and then push the exposure up a little bit so that you can bring in the other ones. But then your fire is probably going to blow out. Auto HDR may catch that, or it may not. So that would be,
and a tripod at that point would also make a big difference.
Absolutely. Tripods in low, I mean, as much as the marketing folks say that you can get away with a lot, having a tripod just makes it so much better, because it reduces any of the shake that we as people will tend to introduce.
Yeah. I think we are just about done. I'm going to post one link in here into the chat. This is an Apple page talking about photography how-tos. This is
Mhm.
an awesome page. It's a bunch of little videos explaining how to do a bunch of different things. One of the things that we have not talked about today is how to edit photos, because it would have taken us another hour, but go take photos, practice, 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 and getting a good photo is always better than editing it afterwards to try and make it better.
Absolutely.
All right, Shayna, I think we've managed to go through at high speed through all of our notes.
Oh, okay. I would like to thank David and Tom for, despite the technical difficulties of giving us a whole lot of information that will be really useful to us as we take our pictures. And I want to let you know that they'll be back again next week and the week after that to talk about other aspects of using your devices, like using the iCloud and using your Apple devices for communication. So please go to our website at www.biblioottawalibrary.ca to register for those and other Tech Cafe sessions. Thank you again for attending today's presentation, and we hope to see you again soon at the Tech Cafe. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.